Hit preference author, Jaduxing copy contract marriage/love after marriage/chasing wife crematorium/entertainment circle sweet and refreshing Weibo at 9 doing poke column for an author to collect thank you sweet little poor ex paranoid rebellious possessive overwhelming tyrant 1 When Wen Ning was 20 years old, she was taken back to the Zhang family in Hanchange to fulfill her marriage contract. After marriage, she humbly and flattered Zhang Shu with him for half a year, but in the end he couldn't warm his heart. In the car not far away, the assistant said nervously, "Mr. Zhang, shall I go and bring my wife back?" The man pursed his lips coldly, closed his eyes and dozed off. "Eating a little hardship will make me remember, I will go home if I can't bear it." Zhang Shu made a miscalculation for the first time. After that night, she never heard her voice again. In a few weeks, Zhang Shu received a call from his sister who was causing trouble at the bar and asked the family to bail. The man didn't care, "Don't let it out, keep it closed." Zhang Mengmeng heard a busy shout, "Brother! My little sister-in-law is here too. Lock it up with me. Help us." Zhang Shu sat up and said, "You ask her to speak to me." Wen Ning looked away, "Don't say it." The man instantly hoarse, "Wait for me, come over immediately." Too later, the Prince of Hanchange condescended to participate in a love variety show, and Wen Ning was forced to partner. But being scolded by black fans, Mr. Zhang dislikes him to death, and has a black face throughout the whole process. He can't wait to block Wen Ning and leave immediately that night. The audio of the program accident flowed out of the hot search on the screen. The man's tone was slightly dark, "Ning Ning, you are mine. Wen Ning, I'm no longer yours." The barrage held her breath, waiting for this ruthless man to get angry. But he heard a sigh, a gentle low smile with a pet, "Then I'm yours." A few minutes later, Zhang Shu posted a Weibo, "If you have the guts to scold again, it would have been difficult to coax, but now it is even more difficult to chase. CP New Year's Eve. I got it for real." Tips: 1. Double C from beginning to end 1v12. The crematorium came quickly and sweetly, so don't worry. Content tags: search keyword, protagonist, find an author collection supporting role, the next book open difficult to pet others, entertainment, sweet pet 1 sentence introduction, first marriage, then love, chasing wife crematorium. At the beginning of August, the Zhang family in Hanchange, the richest man along the coast, held a grand wedding. A great opportunity for a family relationship. On the wedding day, Wen Ning was so nervous that she could not control her trembling. Su Ma followed her, reminding her over and over again of the process of entering the venue, and from time to time she would arrange the gorgeous and heavy skirt for her. Zhang Shu has been abroad during this period of time, and did not come back until the day she tried on the wedding dress. Wen Ning lowered her head and blushed, and couldn't stop thinking about it. After a while, Zhang Shu saw her wearing a wedding dress. What does it look like? When she officially entered the venue, Wen Ning took a deep breath but couldn't help her heartbeat speed up. The white veil hung in front of her, and the fine diamond pendant outlined the perfect collarbone line. Holding a slender waist without a trace of fat immediately attracted everyone's attention. Suddenly, a soft wind lifted her veil slightly for a moment. The delicate and tender face of the girl caused the people around to take a breath, inexplicably stopped the communication, and then the whole room was silent. At a very young age, in addition to the beautiful skin, it is estimated that the means are also unparalleled. He Cheng, the young master of the He family, had a good relationship with Zhang Shu since childhood. They grew up together. Yesterday, he learned from his father that his brother Shu was going to get married. Sitting in the front row, everyone was just looking at the amazement. He immediately hurriedly took out his mobile phone and took a picture of Wen Ning. The aura still cannot be concealed. He Cheng chose 2 photos to send to the WeChat group of a few buddies. Picture.jpg, picture.jpg at Jiangshu. Not kind. You didn't even tell me you got married? Or my dad said something, did we still grow up together? Zhang Shu didn't return, and followed a row of fuck brothers. Except He Cheng, the others have never even heard of Zhang Shu's wedding today. What's more absurd is that Zhang Shu, the man of the wedding, never came to the wedding scene. He Chen Ke had just shouted a few words in the group, when a strange commotion broke out in the auditorium. The wedding march stopped suddenly, and the guests whispered, "Why hasn't the groom come yet? It's impossible for such a big incident to happen to the Jiang family." "Fuck you," Mr. Jiang's face is dark. The third young master of the Jiang family is probably really letting everyone's pigeons. This is too crazy. I have long heard that the Prince of Hanchange is naturally arrogant. I didn't expect that he would be able to stage such a big battle, and no one will give face. My God, I was jealous and hated the bride just now. I lost my face. If I were her, I would jump off the 28th floor immediately." "Pfft, keep your voice down." He Cheng looked up at Wen Ning in the middle of the auditorium. Mr. Zhang covered his heart and blushed. "Get back this beast Zhang Shu immediately." He Cheng's hands trembled when he sent messages in the group. "Brother Shu, are you human? If you don't come to get married, leave the bride alone." He Cheng has seen Zhang Shu's innumerable betrayals in the past 20 years, but now he has never dared to think about this scene in his life. High in the sky, the private jet is heading to the far side of the ocean. The temperature inside the machine is almost freezing. The man's slender fingers on the leather seat pinched Shangan intentionally or unintentionally, his brows were slightly wrinkled, and his angular profile was full of coldness. The people around Zhang Shu have always been well trained, and they are best at observing words and expressions. The arrogance of this prince is unforgettable, and no one dares to hit the muzzle when he is in a bad mood. Everyone in the cabin adhered to the principle that breathing is wrong and kept silent, but the internal bell kept ringing. Assistant Ren Tiangeo's temples twitched, his eyes swept across the face of the king in front of him from time to time, and he silently drafted a small 800 WORDSA for resignation. Half a minute later, the man said lazily, "Yes." Ren Tiangeo didn't dare to delay for a second. "It's the old man." Zhang Shu's lips curled inadvertently, and sneered, "Is it a heart attack or a cerebral thrombosis this time?" Nintendo. Zhang Shu's voice was slow and deep, and every word clearly entered the ear of Mr. Zhang on the inside line. "Flying away? If you dare not come back today, you will lose half of all the shares of the Zhang Corporation." "Rare." The man still snorted. Mr. Zhang knew that this matter could not tie Zhang Shu. He was not uncommon. Over the years, this grandson has been known for his overseas methods, and his net worth is no longer comparable to Jiang's. "I'm a bastard, so what are you, bastard?" "Hey!" Zhang Shu lazily changed his posture. His suit was exquisite and well-dressed, but the words he said were not human. "I don't take you to criticize yourself like that." Nintendo. Zhang Shu's expression didn't change, and he put the phone on the phone without saying a word. I clicked save, then frowned and glanced at the wedding dress with its back wide open, and scolded in a hoarse voice, "Fuck! Is that Zhang Shu?" At 12 o'clock at night, Wen Ning woke up again from a fragmented dream. Safe. When she calmed down a little, she slowly sat up with the quilt and looked around blankly. The soft bed, the silky quilt, the gorgeous diamond-encrusted lamps above her head, and even the sculptures of famous artists at her fingertips cannot overlap with her memory of the past 10 years. Wen Ning lived here for more than 2 months. It is a seaside villa in Yogan Bay, Hanchange. The villa is extravagant and gorgeous, and it is comparable to the dilapidated village house she lived in since childhood. It is called the difference between cloud and mud. Jin Yuzhang Jiao is perfect. However, Wen Ning, who has been hidden for more than 2 months, has not slept peacefully for several days. After a while, her tense nerves were relieved a little, remembering that when she woke up from a daze, she seemed to hear a lot of movement outside the room. She took a deep breath, strong courage out of bed. Holding the disposable slippers prepared for guests in the guest room, Wen Ning cautiously walked to the bedroom door in the dark. "Is Jiangshu back?" the girl asked timidly. Her voice was soft and waxy when she woke up. The only response to her was the empty echo in the hall. She seemed unwilling, and walked to the corridor on the other side. At the end of the corridor was the western kitchen hall. The closer she got, the faint light could be seen. Wen Ning was a little excited, and her brows were filled with anticipation. "Jiangshu, are you back?" "Ah!" As soon as the voice fell, a harsh scream rang out, followed by the sound of tableware and dishes smashing on the ground. The one who knocked off the plate was Hui Fen, the little maid who helped the chef in the villa. She was originally panicked, but when she saw that it was Wen Ning, she became calm. After taking a few breaths, her face suddenly changed, and she frowned and rebuked Wen Ning unabashedly. "You don't sleep at night, and you run out to scare someone to death." Wen Ning was startled by the scolding, and habitually squatted down to clean up the broken ceramic for her. Jiangshu, who did not find his heart, was restless at the moment. One was not paying attention, and a hole was cut by the broken bowl at the tiger's mouth. She was bullied and grew up since she was a child, and her body was constantly injured, big and small. "I don't think there is anything in this small opening, but the appearance of blood overflowing from the tiger's mouth looks a bit oozing." "Body." Seeing that Wen Ning didn't mean to pursue it, Hui Fen breathed a sigh of relief. She originally wanted to take advantage of the middle of the night when no one was there, and come to the western kitchen to steal some ingredients that were not used up during the day and resell them to the hotel. How could she expect to encounter Wen Ning, who did not sleep in the middle of the night? More than 2 months ago, Jiangshu left her here alone after taking her back to the villa, and he didn't even accompany her in the door on the first day he brought her. Not even a little lover or a bed warmer. Maybe it was just too much movement, which disturbed the old housekeeper Su Ma, who lived in the servant room on the first floor. Su Ma likes to take good care of Wen Ning, a well-behaved and timid girl. She looks for the light with sleepy eyes. She is so nervous when she sees the wound on Wen Ning's hand now. She tilted her head and stared sternly at Hui Fen, who was standing with dry eyes, and hurriedly found a medicine box to wrap Wen Ning. Wen Ning's brows and eyes are quiet, and her heart is very moving. She is used to being under the fence, and she has never seen her parents. She has never been so nervous. Endured the pain and slowly suffered, and rarely smelled the smell of alcohol. "It's all right, the minor injury doesn't hurt, just take a nap, don't worry about Su Ma." Wen Ning smiled, but Su Ma didn't listen to her. "I'll change your medicine every day." Wen Ning nodded and thanked her, thinking that she probably left a lot of scars on her body. When Jiangshu saw it, would she think she was not good looking? Thinking of Jiangshu, she asked again, "Jiangshu, is he coming back soon?" Mother Su didn't look up, obviously didn't dare to look her in the eyes. She lied at will, and comforted, "Sir is busy, our husband has done a great job, it's normal to not be back for a while, don't worry about it. However, no matter how busy you are, there is no reason not to come back to the wedding." Jiangshu was absent-minded all day long. No matter what he was doing, Wen Ning wearing a wedding dress and being alone in the auditorium always came to mind. She is obviously a little girl in her early 20s, but she somehow got his taste. The phone rang at the right time. Jiangshu glanced at the number. It was called from Yuganan Villa. The man raised his eyes and picked it up. Wen Ning has fallen back to sleep, and Su Ma is on the other end of the phone. She was bullied. He had been itchy for a day by Wen Ning's photo, but now his eyes were cold. Which grandson touched her? Su Ma felt distressed for Wen Ning and said everything. "Hang up the phone." Jiangshu frowned slightly and called Ren Tiangao. Jiangshu, returned to China. Wen Ning could not sleep well all night, and woke up in a daze at 5 in the morning. Jiangshu still did not go home. Removing yesterday's heavy wedding makeup, the girl's skin looks more translucent, as delicate as a peeled egg, full of childishness. Su Ma can't understand such a little girl, and she doesn't know how to make it what's in, to suffer from this kind of pain. Madam, are you hungry? Tell Suma what you want to eat, and Suma will cook it for you. The corners of Wen Ning's eyes drooped slightly, and she didn't seem to have any energy. It's all good. Mother Su opened her mouth, not knowing how to comfort her. I'm fine. Wen Ning grinned and said softly, Mother Su, go get busy first, I want to sleep for a while, I'm a little tired. It was her who was wronged, but the first thing she thought of was comforting others. In the kitchen, the maid Hui Fen was sullenly heating dishes in front of the cooking table. Mother Su couldn't bear to wake Wen Ning up, so she had to tell the kitchen to reheat the food every half hour. Hui Fen entered the villa from Wen Ning and ignored her. At this moment, the hot dishes are reluctant, and I always feel that I am wasting my time. Hui Fen moved her hands casually without being particular about it. Zhang Xiao doesn't take her seriously at all. He hasn't even returned home for a few months, so I'm afraid he won't be able to avoid her. Perhaps she has raised a bunch of small 3 and 4 long ago. What is she? Now the rich like to play with the net red hot girl little tender model, her ragged little white flower, has long been it's not tasty anymore. Wen Ning stood at the door of the restaurant, and her eyelashes trembled when she heard the phrase there are people outside. Hui Fen turned around and was startled by Wen Ning standing at the door, raised her eyebrows and glared at her, smashed the plate on the table, the porcelain bowl collided with the dining table, the sound that came out was harsh. What kind of young grandma do you really think you are? You have to cook another meal for you. I don't know that you have to take the initiative to serve it when it's time for your meal. Didn't your parents teach you? She seemed to have a lot of anger, because Suma was away at the moment, no one was protecting Wen Ning, and she kept saying unbearably, some women really don't love themselves, and they rush to send them here for the sake of property. Sleeping with people, how can I know that Zhang Xiao doesn't even want to touch it, and I don't know how many gold masters have been slept in before, it's really dirty. After Hui Fen finished speaking, she brought a bowl of soup over with white eyes. When approaching Wen Ning, she intentionally tilted the tray in her hand, and a lot of soup spilled out from the bowl, and the corner of Wen Ning's clothes was dyed with a lot of spots. Before she had time to react, she saw Hui Fen grinning disdainfully. Oh, I'm sorry, my hands are slippery, it's definitely not intentional. In addition to the cold soup and cold water on the table, it was the leftovers that were deliberately burned. Hui Fen raised her chin and her eyes grew to the top of her head. If you like it or not, that's all, the Zhang family. But no one is accustomed to you. By the way, let me tell you that you have to eat something before you are educated, this is the rule of the Zhang family. However, as soon as she finished speaking, she suddenly smashed a soup bowl in front of her. Ah! The hot soup spilled on the back of Hui Fen's hand, and she screamed subconsciously, but before she could react, she had trouble with Wen Ning, and raised her head to face Zhang Shina with cruel cold eyes. What a big temper! The man snorted lightly, with a chill all over his body. The rules of the Zhang family? When will my wife, Zhang Shu, have your turn to teach me? Hui Fen was so frightened that she lost the slightest vigor. She opened her eyes wide and was at a loss. Zhang Shu. Wen Ning didn't expect that he would come back at this time. At this moment, there was surprise in his eyes. Seeing him, he felt a trace of grievance inexplicably. Zhang Shu tilted her head and glanced at her. The little girl was wearing a large white t-shirt. The open-back wedding dress I saw on the plane had a different temperament, and the appearance in front of me was even more irritating. Zhang Shu took a few steps to her side, and pulled her wrist over. Tisk, the hand was soft, not different from what he imagined, even more tender. It's so hot that you don't. He raised his eyebrows, completely contrary to the way he was angry just now, inexplicably seeing a rare human nature. Wen Ning shook her head, and his cheeks were a little hot when he saw it. Zhang Shu hooked his lips, and took advantage of the trend to hold her little hand, but it happened to catch the tiger's mouth that was cut by the broken bowl a few days ago. Wen Ning couldn't hold back the pain, she shrank her hand, the man immediately lowered his head and took her hand to check. The tiger's mouth was wrapped in gauze. Jiang Shu frowned and asked, "How did you do it?" Hui Fen was so frightened that she quickly looked at her and begged for mercy, motioning her not to say anything, but before Wen Ning could speak, Su Ma rushed over and told everything that happened that night. Jiang Shu lowered his head, with a cold expression on his face, and the next second, he raised his foot and kicked the dining chair next to Hui Fen's calf, and the chair fell to the ground. "Sit!" "Ang!" Hui Fen endured the pain in her leg, so frightened that her voice trembled. Jiang Shu's eyes were contemptuous, his tongue pressed against his cheek, and his whole person had an inexplicable ruffian air. His aura was overwhelming. "Eat, if you can't finish eating, don't leave the table, the Zhang family rules of course as Zhang family members." Hui Fen didn't dare to say a word, and buried her head in her mouth. Assistant Ren Tiangao, who came with him, glanced at him. The table was full of things that were scorched by alternating hot and cold. He tilted his head and whispered, "Mr. Zhang, forget it, the little girl is ignorant." Jiang Shu snorted coldly, looked down at the petite and quiet Wen Ning, and felt a sense of dryness in her heart. "My wife is also a little girl." Nintendo. Wen Ning stood there and looked at Jiang Shu. She has never been protected by anyone. She should have been relieved and moved, but he did not show up at the wedding during the day, and the atmosphere between the two was a little awkward. Jiang Shu was inexplicably uncomfortable in her eyes. He had done countless things in his life, and he had never felt guilty, but at this moment, this feeling was extremely strong. "My eyes were on Wen Ning, and the guilt became stronger, and then I simply pulled the tie irritably and left a sentence, 'I'm tired.' Head, Su Ma, change the medicine for her hand." He left just like that, without saying a word to her. Wen Ning's eyes drooped slightly, clenched her palms, and followed behind him timidly. Jiang Shu felt a little dry all over. He took off his suit jacket and hung it at his elbow. Wen Ning hesitated for a while at the bottom of the stairs, but in the end she could only watch his back walk away. In the 2 months she lived in Yuganan, she never dared to set foot on the second floor. Jiang Shu took a cold shower. Head. I have to say it, since the day he brought Wen Ning back from the small village, the whole person was inexplicably a little wrong. Jiang Shu sat on the sofa in the bedroom wearing a nightgown for a while. After more than 10 hours of flight, he was already tired, so he should rest early, but at this moment he didn't know what he was waiting for. There are not many toothbrushes, and there is no trace of Wen Ning's life. The man frowned slightly, his face a little unsightly. Mother Su knocked on the door and came in with a cup of tea. "The soothing tea brewed by my wife with herbs is said to relieve fatigue and make you sleep better." Jiang Shu didn't look up. "Where's your wife?" "My wife has been living in the downstairs guest room for a while now, and I dare not come up without your consent, or, you go and let her move up and live?" "The wife is timid, this villa is big, she is one people will always be afraid." "Why, I have to ask myself." Jiang Shu sneered coldly, and didn't even want to touch the teacup. His attitude was indifferent. "No need, let her know, and come back to the old house with me tomorrow night." The next evening, Wen Ning changed into a clean and simple white dress, which was the most decent dress she could get. Jiang Shu only glanced at her, then went out on his own, without stopping for a moment to wait for her. The two are going to see the old man at the old house. The back seat of the black Maybach was silent. Jiang Shu frowned and closed his eyes, while Wen Ning sat up carefully and neatly, pursing his lips and not even daring to bend his back, like a well-behaved elementary school student, only occasionally tilted his head to sneak a glance at the man beside him. The car passed a bustling commercial street. Wen Ning caught a glimpse of a pastry shop on the side of the road. Her face was a little happy, seeing that Jiang Shu seemed to have fallen asleep. She dared to whisper to the driver, "Uncle Lin, can you stop here for a while? I want to go down and buy something." The driver only listened to Jiang Shu's instructions, but Wen Ning mentioned it, and he didn't know what to do. In the end, Jiang Shu opened his mouth lazily, his voice a little deep, "Stop." When he opened his eyes again, he saw Wen Ning got out of the car excitedly and ran to the pastry shop with small steps. When he was accidentally stepped on a skateboard and wearing a mask by the street young man bumped. The other parties seemed to say sorry. Wen Ning raised her head and smiled sweetly and said it was okay, but it was such an unexpected collision that Jiang Shu finally suppressed the irritability and inexplicably surged up. He tilted his head, and without looking away from Wen Ning, he saw her take out an old-looking wallet from her pocket, took out a stack of loose banknotes, counted them for a long time, and then changed them, returned 2 gift boxes. When the little girl came back, her face was obviously a little more smiling than before. Jiang Shu didn't know how to leave him so happy for half a minute, inexplicably displeased. "What did you buy?" "Bring a gift for Grandpa. I saw on TV a few days ago that this cake is delicious, so I bought some." Wen Ning said in a soft voice, "Do you want to eat it?" "Listen." Said it was delicious. She put on gloves, took a piece from another box and handed it to Jiang Shu, with an obvious flattery on her face. This little guy has so much money in total, and thinking about bringing a copy for him, Jiang Shu unconsciously hooked his lips, but when she thought of just now, she smiled so sweetly at that strange man, with a bad temper some rushed, "Don't eat. I will be staying overnight in the old house tonight. With my grandfather here, the two naturally have to sleep in the same room." Mr. Zhang left Jiang Shu to speak in the study, and Wen Ning went back to the room to wash and rest first. However, the bath switch in the old house is different from that in Yuganan, so she stretched out her hand, and the hot water was sprayed from the top of her head. The moment Jiang Shu entered the door, a sharp sound came from the bathroom call. Jiang Shu's whole figure became dry as if he was on fire, but a trace of contempt appeared in his eyes, so he was reserved for a night, and he couldn't help showing his fox's tail so quickly. The corners of his lips twitched slightly, with a sneer, his expression changed to a sullen ruffian, his eyes fixed on Wen Ning, and he slowly began to loosen his tie. "Zhang, the wife doesn't even close the door to take a bath, is she inviting me?" The author has something to say. Zhang, someone, exciting. One day later, Jiang Shu recalled the pastry he didn't eat, and regretted it too much. "Ning Ning, feed me a cake." "Wen Ning, no hands." "Jiang Shu, please, baby." She froze on the spot, at a loss. The pure white cotton fabric on her body was half soaked in water at the moment, clinging to her body, petite but still curvy. I don't know how to use this." The girl's voice was soft and timid. Jiang Shu chuckled, the tip of his tongue pressed against his back molars, his eyes were deep, his pupils were dark, and his body was full of wildness that did not match his well-dressed. "I teach you." Wen Ning bit her lip, lowered her eyes and dared not look at him. When she heard him speak, she unconsciously took a step back, but unfortunately there was a cold and clean wall behind her, there was no way to retreat. Jiang Shu loosened his tie and unbuttoned his shirt with his long fingers. 1. 2. Wen Ning felt that her heart seemed to be jumping faster as she unbuttoned it. She knew that when she got married, the day would come, but she didn't expect it in such an unexpected way. "I haven't washed." She seemed to be trying to make a last effort. "Together." Jiang Shu's Adam's apple slid up and down for a moment impatiently, his voice was a little hoarse, but it was deep but very magnetic. But at this moment there are countless desires hidden. The huge round bathtub behind her was filled with hot water at some point, and when the temperature condensation reacted, she was already in the heat. The hot water around her was hot, but the temperature on her body was even worse. When Jiang Shu held the last thin piece of fabric on her body with big hands, his heart was dry for no reason. "I just wanted to scare this little fox who pretended to be reserved but couldn't help showing his tail," but he didn't expect the little fox to be shy and closed his eyes, wagging his tail at him unintentionally. He actually followed her way like this, out of control. For so many years, he has boasted that he is very capable of self-control, but at this moment he has lost the slightest sense of reason. exercise his rights as a husband for granted. Only Zhang Shu. Before this, the two of them had never had this kind of thing before. But a man is always a man, and there is always no teacher in the matter of pleasure, and Wen Ning can only let him toss and turn. From the bathroom to the bedroom, everything you see is a mess. Zhang Shu has never taken care of other people's feelings. Naturally, she only depends on her own feelings. A little girl is always cute. No matter how tough she is, she still needs pain the most. When she couldn't stand it the most, her mind was blank and she didn't even think about it. With a crying voice, she blurted out the familiar and unfamiliar brother Zhang Shu in her memory. However, because of the lingering brother Zhang Shu frowned and couldn't fall asleep. After slowing down for a while, Wen Ning finally had the strength to open her eyes, and she felt like she was run over by a car. No one taught her about this when she grew up. Fear and grievance. She leaned beside Zhang Shu almost subconsciously, as if she was closer to him, and she felt more secure. It was just a small touch, but it disturbed the man's thoughts. Zhang Shu's voice was a little dull, more impatient, it sounded very indifferent, and it was indeed as indifferent as he had always been style. I don't like people touching me when I sleep. Pulling X relentlessly. Wen Ning was a little afraid of him at first, but at this moment it was like being warned. She immediately retracted her hand, and was honest and quiet and dared not move again. The discomfort on her body was multiplied by the sudden silence. She couldn't fall asleep with her eyes closed. She wanted to go to the bathroom to take a shower, but she was worried about disturbing the man beside her. Fortunately, it was all right. She grabbed a piece of clothing from the ground and wrapped it around her body. She held her breath and turned around to take a peek at Zhang Shu. Walk to the bathroom. When she was in front of the mirror, she realized that she was wearing the white shirt that Zhang Shu had taken off before. The man's shirt was large, like a skirt over her body, and the buttons were nowhere to be seen. Wen Ning clutched the neckline with both hands, and glanced at Zhang Shu on the big bed. His clothes are on his body at the moment, his chest is bare, one arm is pressed against his forehead, his muscles are beautiful, he can see that he is a well-trained and very self-disciplined man, with a smooth jawline. Even when closed looking at it, you can also feel the oppression, and the coldness and alienation are innate. A few hours ago, the two were doing the most intimate things. Wen Ning was worried that going to bed would disturb him again, so after thinking about it, she simply went to lie down on the small sofa beside the bed, and soon fell asleep. Zhang Shu tilted his head, with the faint moonlight, stared at the little man on the sofa, got up after a while, raised his head casually and poured a whole glass of ice water, took out a pack of cigarettes and went to the balcony, went up, stopped for a few seconds when passing the sofa, and finally picked up a thin quilt and put it on Wen Ning. Wen Ning woke up in a daze when the next morning was bright. She does not have the habit of sleeping late, and her work and rest have always been regular. In order to make money to treat her grandfather a few years ago, she spent almost every day with the moonlight at 4 or 5 in the morning. It's just that Zhang Shu was not a human being last night. When she woke up in the morning, it was past 9 o'clock. The strange thing was that although she was a little afraid of him, last night was the one who had been sleeping soundly for so long. The most practical night was probably because Zhang Shu was in the room, so she could feel more at ease. Zhang Shu was nowhere to be seen on the bed. Wen Ning sat cross-legged on the sofa with the quilt in her arms and felt a little lost. Looking at the mess in the room, and recalling the arrogance last night, her cheeks were so hot. After a simple grooming, and habitually tidying up the bedroom, another half-hour passed. Wen Ning went downstairs, intending to find Zhang Shu, but never thought of accidentally bumping into the side hall. At the dining table, a woman is eating breakfast, dressed in exquisite and gorgeous clothes. She is trying to maintain elegance with every gesture, and she can hear melodious music if you listen carefully. Wen Ning recognized that it was Wang Fan, the wife who was sitting beside the second young master of the Zhang family at dinner last night. According to her seniority, she should have called her second sister-in-law, but she was so worried when she saw such a battle. It would disturb her. Wen Ning was careful not to make a sound, and just turned around to leave, but was stopped by someone. I don't even want to say hello when I see you. I'm from the country, and I don't have the slightest courtesy. Wen Ning frowned slightly. The meanness in her words was completely different from the second sister-in-law she saw in front of everyone last night. She hesitated for a second. Second sister-in-law, early. It's not early, and I don't even look at what time it is, and you still expect us to wait for you for breakfast? The Zhang family doesn't have this habit. Wen Ning doesn't have this habit either. She never thought that someone would wait for her. Breakfast is optional for her. Anyway, she's used to being hungry all these years. Sorry, second sister-in-law, I overslept. It's okay if I don't eat breakfast. Wen Ning decided to leave. Hey, wait, why are you walking so fast? Rush to complain to the old man? Don't think about it. The old man drank some wine last night and went to the hospital to hang water early in the morning. What? Zhang Shu didn't tell you. Also, he didn't even attend the wedding, so why would he tell you more? Wedding is a thorn in Wen Ning's heart. No matter how warm the rabbit is, she always has a temper. She didn't intend to continue to be ridiculed here. She turned around and wanted to leave, but was pulled back by Wang Fan's wrist. Trip over the dining chair behind him. However, the expected fall did not come. Zhang Shu didn't know when he came in. He stretched out his hand to wrap her waist, and the little girl fell on him instantly. The mean female voice continued, "Be careful. These tables and chairs are all wood carvings from the Ice Age. If they crash, you will pay. The wood carving during the Ice Age is just a place for my Zhang family to eat." Wen Ning, a genuine young grandmother of the Zhang family, just wants to bump and play. I have no problem, but you. Zhang Shu didn't wait. After she finished speaking, she interrupted. His voice was cold, and there was no trace of humanity at all. His thin lips were slightly hooked, and his smile was contemptuous. Your family's Chen Li's salary may not be affordable. The second child of the Zhang family is named Chen Li, and Chen Li's surname is Zhang but not Chen. Outsiders will know that he is just an adopted son. The son was adopted. The real young lady of the Zhang family is undoubtedly a title that Wang Fan has always wanted but cannot be justified. At least in most people's minds, she, like her husband, is not recognized. Wang Fan was most afraid of Zhang Shu in his heart, and Chen Li had not been able to run smoothly in the circle for so many years, largely because of Zhang Shu's ruthless methods. I just wanted to take advantage of no one at home and take advantage of him, a little lady who was easy to bully at first sight. How could he know that he seemed to have installed a surveillance camera on Wen Ning, and he had to come back so timely? Wang Fan stood up and walked crampedly in place, neither staying nor staying. Zhang Shu took Wen Ning's hand, lowered his head and asked, "Have you eaten yet?" "What?" She didn't respond. "What would you like for breakfast?" "No, don't bother." Zhang Shu tilted his head, his tone was indifferent but could not refuse. "Please Mrs. Chen to make some famous snacks in Hancheng. I remember that you were also a hotel waiter in the past, you shouldn't do rude things difficult." Wang Fan was so angry that the hyaluronic acid on his face was about to deform, but the other party was Zhang Shu. She didn't dare to complain at all, so she could only watch the little country sparrow being killed by Zhang Shu. Protected away. Zhang Shu held Wen Ning, his thin lips pursed tightly and did not speak. Wen Ning tilted her head to peek at him, but did not dare to speak first. Where there are no outsiders, the atmosphere between the two returned to the previous state. "Does it still hurt?" Zhang Shu suddenly asked. Wen Ning was stunned for a moment, thinking that he had just hit the dining chair, and hurriedly shook his head. "It doesn't hurt, I didn't hit much." "Zhang Shu tisk, I said last night." Wen Ning's fair face was so red that she couldn't see. The man coughed lightly and did not continue the topic. how did you get to the side hall? Wen Ning, I'm lost, it's too big here. Jiang Shu was about to laugh at him, is he a shrewd little fox or an idiot? How can you be so stupid? I can bully others when I'm not there. Wen Ning, I've caused you trouble. Jiang Shu was really off this time, holding her hand and kneading, it's trouble. You don't have to be so honest when you are bullied in the future. You can get it back as you want, and there will always be someone who will give it to you. Are you? Wen Ning lowered her head, her palms were hot as he held it, did he mean to protect her? She didn't dare to think about it, and remembered what Wang Fan said just now, she was busy ask, is grandpa better? It's fine. Jiang Shu said casually. The old man has not been pretending to be sick for a day or two. He always uses this trick. The doctors at home are all people under my hands. Event. Wen Ning nodded reassuringly, then where are you going? Jiang Shu suddenly stopped walking upstairs, turned his head and raised his eyebrows, looking a little wild, what? Take care of me. The author has something to say. Jiang Shu, does it still hurt? Ning Ning, it doesn't hurt much. Jiang Shu? I'm not trying hard enough. Ning Ning? Don't come here. Leave a comment. No, that's not what I meant. Wen Ning lowered her head, how dare she control him? It was probably due to what happened last night. Jiang Shu always felt that he couldn't help Wen Ning, sighed lightly, and rubbed the top of her head with his big hand, go to the company. In the past few years, Jiang Shu's work has been focused on overseas. He is arrogant and arrogant. He is too lazy to do such useless things as inheritance of property. He didn't even care about it at all. He started from scratch in his early 20s. In just a few years, he acquired dozens of large companies. His net worth has skyrocketed, and he has dominated Wall Street. The capital is no longer comparable to the Zhang family. Outside, his name Jiang Shu is louder than the title of the prince of the Zhang family. Now that Mr. Zhang is very old, he is pretending to be sick to call him back to take over the Zhang family. For him, it is just to take some time to do charity. Mr. Zhang values this grandson more than his two sons. Although Jiang Shu is rebellious, he is a natural ruler who carves strategies into his bones. The grandfather and grandson talked for a long time in the study last night. Jiang Shu was originally not interested in returning to the Zhang family, but through the farce this morning, he became somewhat interested. He took Wen Ning back to the room, went into the cloakroom, picked out a suit at random and put it on, saw Wen Ning standing stupidly looking inside, slightly hooked her lips, her expression stained a little joking, you have to peek when you change clothes? Mrs. Jiang's hobbies are quite special. I'm not. Wen Ning was stunned, and before she had time to defend herself, she heard Jiang Shu solemnly and slowly say, I thought you had seen enough last night. No. The girl's face was stained with shyness. The man raised his eyebrows, his tone full of teasing, oh, didn't see enough? Then come here. Wen Ning bit her lip and stopped, staring at him shyly. Jiang Shu took out a navy blue tie from the closet, which matched his cold temperament. Seeing that Wen Ning couldn't come, he walked over. Have you ever tie someone? Wen Ning shook her head. Seeing her shaking her head, Jiang Shu was inexplicably happy, can you fight? Wen Ning still shook her head. Jiang Shu snorted, thinking that her shy reaction was funny, he was determined to tease her. He lowered his eyes and held her hand, insisting that she hit him. The man is tall and Wen Ning is small, standing in front of him, but only to his chest. The girl stood on tiptoe obediently. The two tossed for a while, and then the crooked tie was finished. Until Jiang Shu's car slowly left the old house, Wen Ning hadn't recovered from this sudden intimacy. Ren Tiangao, who was driving in the driver's seat, was a little absent-minded. Through the rearview mirror, he stared at Jiang Shu in the back seat. Jiang Shu could know the every move of the people around him even with his eyes closed. Ren Tiangao hesitated for a second, "Mr. Zhang, your tie today seems to be not well stitched." Zhang Shu opened his eyes lazily, his eyes swept over the crooked tie, and the corner of his lips ticked indistinctly, "I like it." Jiang's made preparations for Zhang Shu as early as a week ago. "I heard that the prince of the Zhang family is young but ruthless. He is a difficult role to deal with. Even his father Zhang Jianchuan has to give him 3 points, which is difficult to control, but he is also the father of the group, Zhang Hongyuan, the only recognized heir for a lifetime." After a few days, everyone in the group was trembling, afraid that the airborne prince would find something wrong. At 10:05 in the morning, Zhang Shu was late. The hall of the group building has been lined up, all of them have received professional training, and bowing is from a unified angle. The leader is the second young master of the Zhang family, Chen Li, who was quite proud in the company before. Even with the identity of Chen Li, he has to come out of the office honestly and bow his head to Zhang Shu. "Ah Shu, are you here?" Chen Li smiled politely, walked towards Zhang Shu, and stretched out his hands. However, Zhang Shu didn't even bother to give him half a point of his eyes, so he straightened his tie with one hand, skipped him, and walked straight to the CEO's elevator entrance. Ren Tiangao followed behind him. When he passed Chen Li, he put his fist into his mouth and coughed lightly, "Mr. Chen, it's best not to talk about personal relationships in the company. What's more, Zhang Shu has no personal relationship with him." Chen Li had to call Zhang Shu Mr. Zhang. On the first day that Zhang Shu came back, he ruthlessly gave him a disgrace in front of the whole company. After a while, the high-level executives rushed to the 28th floor to attend the first meeting where Zhang Shu was present, and the rest of the employees kept exchanging eyes with wonderful expressions. The small group inside the company is unprecedentedly lively and there are many discussions. "I don't need a salary. I want to pick President Zhang to debut." Just now Zhang always deliberately ignored President Chen? Damn, Mr. Chen's expression was embarrassing. I was standing in front of me, and I almost couldn't help laughing. As for the small role of Mr. Chen, Mr. Zhang really can't do it deliberately. I heard that Mr. Zhang has always been the most nuisance of this kind of old man. How can the orthodox prince put his adopted son in his eyes? Yes, even the old chairman has nothing to do with him. As soon as this genetic advantage comes out, at the same age of 27 or 8, Mr. Chen is obviously much greasy. The figure is so good, I envy his wife, can see President Zhang who is not wearing clothes. I want to marry President Zhang. I have to say that Zhang Shu has a quirky temper, but he seems to be a leader by nature. With just a single step in the door, he will immediately make the company's employees, big and small, turn their backs. In the conference room, the senior management of each department raised their spirits, sat upright, and reported the current situation of the projects at hand to Zhang Shu one by one, but Zhang Shu didn't seem to care much, and leaned lazily in the boss's chair, the finger lit at the conference table once or twice. After all, Chen Li has been in charge of the company group for many years, and a large part of the management is his confidant. What can be presented to Zhang Shu must be well prepared and impeccable. Not much. Before returning to China, everything in the group had been thoroughly checked by Ren Tiangao. Zhang Shu listened to 2 sentences in his left ear and right ear, but if he made a random sound, it was straight to the point. When Wang Dong reported, he was obviously much more confident than the previous people. He was a distant relative of Chen Li, and he moved to the Zhang family for a few years. Head, we are in the middle of the Yuquan village project. President Chen has been running for this project for 2 months, and he has not eaten or slept several times. Zhang Shu seemed to be casual, but suddenly interrupted, I only listened to the results. Wang Dong paused, the result is much better than expected. Zhang Shu's expression became sullen, how much did they ask for? 4 billion. Zhang Shu sneered, how much can you return? Wang Dong couldn't understand Zhang Shu's expression, and he lost his confidence just now, 5 or 5 billion. Already. The word raise is undoubtedly humiliating. Wang Dong couldn't stand it any longer. Mr. Zhang, you can't say that. Oh? I didn't expect that when I would have to teach Wang Dong to speak a sentence. Zhang Shu tilted his head, his voice was cold, and there was a bit of ruffian in his sneer. The land in Yuquan village. The price of only 3.7 billion is given, and once you export 4 billion, I have to ask you for advice for the middle 300 million, Wang Dong, I have a big appetite. Dong Wang was obviously panicked. He never thought that Zhang Shu would come back suddenly, and before he could stand firm, he could immediately take him to the knife. Don't talk nonsense, pay attention to evidence in everything. Ren Tiangao, who was standing by the side, calmly took out the prepared documents and distributed them. The board of directors has one copy. Is the specific information of Wang Dong and Chen Li's privately founded leather bag company. Zhang Shu chuckled and didn't care. Wang Dong, I'm not discussing with you, it doesn't matter if I take the evidence or not, if you don't want to admit it, I will treat it as 4 billion, anyway 300 million is neither painful nor itchy to me or the Zhang sect. Wang Dong heaved a sigh of relief, thinking that Zhang Shu was planning to let him go, to save face and not hold him accountable. After all, he was considered an elder, so he still had some weight in the company. It's just this project, I don't plan to continue. You. Now not only Wang Dong, but even Chen Li can't keep calm. The original partner of this project was his private company. If Zhang Shu did not step in, everything would be smooth sailing. The 300 million that Wang Donghu had eaten was also thrown into it early. If Zhang Shu suddenly stopped, he would definitely lose all his money and go bankrupt. However, Zhang Shu already knew about these tricks. The implication is that from today on Jiang's door he will not want to enter. Chen Li stood up abruptly, but we have already talked about this project, and we have bought the land. If it is suddenly interrupted, then the 4 billion in the early stage will become a bamboo basket to draw water. Ah! Excuse me, money is not wasted like that. Zhang Shu chuckled lightly, 4 billion seemed to be just a number for him. The man's expression lightly said, it's okay, Yuquan village is my wife's hometown, I just visited that place a while ago, the scenery and environment it's not bad, it's better to build a holiday manor for her and spend 4 billion to buy my wife a happy one, it's worth it. The meeting is over, in the president's office. Zhang Jianchuan walked in with a sullen face, followed by Chen Li with an equally ugly face. Zhang Shu. Zhang Jianchuan was straight to the point, and didn't even bother to fight Tai Chi. What's the matter with you? Let you come back to let you manage the Zhang family well, and strengthen the Zhang family together with your second brother. Be bigger, you have strong ability, help your second brother a little more, it is not for you to find fault and blame. Zhang Shu tilted his head, swept his back molars with the tip of his tongue, frowned slightly. In front of his father, he really saw the rebellion of his youth. Okay, Chen Li, make a small report pretty fast. Ren Tiangao brought a few cups of tea over with a formulaic smile, and Zhang Jianchuan waved him on the carpet, making a muffled sound. The corner of Zhang Shu's lips tickled disdainfully, I can come back, but it is for the sake of grandfather's sake. Even in the small temple of Jiang's, I don't think the place is too narrow to play. The man stared at his father lazily, suddenly chuckled, but there was a warning in his words. Chen Li, go and ask the person in your family what he did in the morning, take care of it, don't it's my fault for not reminding me. As soon as the two left, the wind reached the ears of the employees below. I heard that the meeting in the morning was bloody. Mr. Chen's multi-billion projects were withdrawn as soon as he said it was withdrawn, and Wang Dong was directly exiled, and the right-hand man of President Chen was removed. This is Tohi Dai. What a ruthless man, I am single, let's announce the divorce from him. Pft, let's say something more exciting, I heard that Mr. Jiang's withdrawal of the project seems to be to give his wife a vacation manor by the way. I heard that Mr. Chen provokes his wife. I'm happy, poof 2333 Zhang Shu's face froze, holding a cigarette between his fingers, standing in front of the floor-to-ceiling window with one hand in his pocket, quietly recalling the farce just now. He just thought it was ridiculous. He suddenly wanted to call Wen Ning at home to hear her voice. When entering the number on the mobile phone, he moved his hand for a while, and then pulled out a self-deprecating smile. Simple self-introduction. In the evening, Zhang Shu took Wen Ning back to Yuganan. As soon as she entered the door, she found that in addition to Su Ma, the servants in the villa had been completely replaced. Zhang Shu lazily said, "Even a servant can bully you, are you ashamed?" Wen Ning puffed her cheeks behind him. Although these words were not pleasant, she felt warm inexplicably. Su Ma saw it and smiled while wiping the vase. After Zhang Shu finished speaking, he went up to the second floor, but Wen Ning habitually returned to the first floor guest room he stayed in. He threw his coat on the sofa at will, and went downstairs with one hand unbuttoned. She turned her back to the door and looked out the window, holding her hair in both hands and tying a high ponytail full of student spirit. Against the bright light spilling in from the window, it seemed that she was covered with a layer of light. The skirt reaches to the knees, revealing a slender calf, and the white nape under the two small suspenders can be seen at a glance, which looks very attractive. Zhang Shu didn't say anything, just leaned against the door and watched. Wen Ning turned around and was slightly startled. "What's wrong?" Zhang Shu was stunned for a moment, and he didn't remember why he came to find her. But the next second, he took out his mobile phone and reported a series of numbers in a light tone. Wen Ning blinked her eyes. "Zhang Shu, mobile phone number, save it." The little girl sighed, and hurriedly flipped out her phone to save it. When she entered the first number, she suddenly responded, "I have it." Zhang Shu raised his eyebrows and glanced at her. His private number has not been changed for more than 10 years, but he usually does not give it to others, even for important business partners. Contact him. He didn't think much, but his eyes suddenly stayed on Wen Ning's mobile phone, the white flip phone, clean but hard to hide the old, like a product of the last century. "Where did you get this phone from?" Wen Ning looked down at the things in her hands that were out of tune with this era, and didn't think there was any problem. She raised her head and smiled naturally. "Oh, I bought it at the market the year before last, more than 400. She earned more than 400 by working part-time, which is a huge sum of money for Wen Ning. Zhang Shu took out a black gold card and threw it on her bed without thinking. "I turned around and wanted to leave, but suddenly turned around and said, I haven't planned to be a vegetarian yet. As soon as I get married." The author has something to say. Mr. Zhang, who is flamboyant and powerful, is approaching us. "Tell me something. As for me, I started with meat at the beginning. I heard that there are a few people next door. What is Mr. Fu, Mr. Tang, and the like, who have been through dozens of chapters without moving, and I am despised by me." The few people next door who made money from milk powder took the time to sneer and say, "Oh, eat a few meals, so we can go on the road. If you haven't collected it yet, please help to collect it, thank you." When Wen Ning reacted, Zhang Shu had gone far. She went to the bed and picked up the card, looked at it curiously, and put it in the diary properly. "Then I packed the only 2 or 3 pieces of clothes and moved them to the second floor obediently. The Yuganan villa is big. Wen Ning has only been on the first floor before, this is the first time to go upstairs. The layout of the second floor is very different from the first floor. The living room and the living room are interspersed everywhere, and even the road is empty. The master bedroom was designed with privacy in mind at the beginning, and the location is even more difficult to find." Ning went around for a long time before walking to the door by mistake. The door was ajar. She didn't dare to go in at the station door, she just raised her hand and buttoned it lightly. After a while, the door was opened from the inside. The man was holding the doorknob, wrapped in a white bath towel. His upper body was naked, his hair was slightly damp, and occasionally there were drops of water from the black hair. It slipped, flowing through the well-trained chest, across the waist and abdomen, and finally disappeared into the invisible place. It seemed that he had just taken a shower. Wen Ning's face flushed red. When I was little, I was homeless and asked for shelter. Jiang Shu hooked his lips unconsciously, looking a little ruffian. Come in. Wen Ning followed obediently into the room, still embarrassed to look up. Jiang Shu deliberately played a hooligan. How can you be so ashamed? Last night you didn't open your eyes except crying and crying. She didn't dare to recall last night. She blushed hot, put away her luggage, and ran downstairs. The man chuckled, his expression different from the indifference he had in the company this morning. The clothes are warm. Clean but old and cheap, looks worn for many years, pitiful by the rows of expensive haute couture beside him. Jiang Shu took back his eyes, and casually took a pure black t-shirt and put it on his body. Compared with the seriousness when wearing a suit, the loose home clothes are more lazy, with a little more casualness. A touch of ruffian. Mother Su cooked a table of sumptuous dishes in the evening. Jiang Shu came a step late, and Wen Ning sat upright and waited for him like a primary school student. It was the first time that the two of them sat face to face alone at a table to eat. Jiang Shu is not elegant when he eats, although his net worth is terrifying, but many habits are not like the rich second-generation sons, rebellious and unruly, not following the rules, and sometimes he is very down-to-earth. Eating, don't be picky when it comes to things, and don't pay attention to the so-called etiquette. Wen Ning occasionally raised her head to peek at him, and felt that he was eating the same way as before, which made people look inexplicably satisfied. Jiang Shu cut a piece of lamb chops, and when he raised his eyes, he happened to see this little boy staring at him in a daze. The man chuckled, not uncomfortable, but felt quite interesting. Do you want to eat or watch me? Do I have something to eat? Wen Ning returned to her senses, and immediately buried herself in a mouthful of vegetables. Jiang Shu teased her reluctantly, and lowered his voice, if I want to eat something else, I'll give it to you tonight. The little girl blushed and coughed for a long time. During the meeting, Jiang Shu took a call and communicated in English throughout. Jiang Shu agreed with a faint expression, raised his eyes and looked at Wen Ning. Seeing this little boy looking at him with admiring eyes, he was inexplicably happy. Do you understand? Wen Ning shook her head embarrassedly. Jiang Shu finished eating, didn't explain, and didn't leave, just sat lazily in the chair with his long legs spread apart. His posture was quite casual, remembering the situation in the cloakroom when he just went downstairs, asked casually, how many years have you been wearing those two clothes? She really did the math. My sister gave it to me after her second year of junior high. She didn't wear a new one when she grew up, and she wore it for many years. Jiang Shu raised his eyebrows, co-authoring or picking up what others wore. If you have time to buy some clothes, you will come with me on some occasions later. He chuckled and said, when others see it, they think I can't support you. Wen Ning pursed her lips and nodded hurriedly, her face a little embarrassed. She embarrassed him. After eating, Jiang Shu returned to the study without waiting for Wen Ning. In recent years, Mr. Jiang's health has not been as good as before. Jiang Shu's father does not have much real power in his hands, and there are many bad seeds buried under Jiang's roots. On the first day Jiang Shu returned to the company to take over, he strong start to cut the weeds. It wasn't difficult for him, it just took some time. Wen Ning saw that Jiang Shu had finished eating, and his mind was no longer at the dinner table. At the side, Su Ma laughed and felt distressed. Too much to eat, too thin. My granddaughter is only in junior high school, her arms should be as thick as your legs. Wen Ning smiled and ate a few more bites. Su Ma is pleased. Hey, that's right, take care of your body, and give birth to a chubby little cub for Mr. Su in the future. While Su Ma is young, I can help you to go to school. Su Ma. She blushed, but the corners of her lips couldn't hide her smile. They had just gotten married, and she never thought of this. You and Mr. are both good looking. No matter who this child is born, it must be a handsome boy and a beauty. She was so embarrassed that she buried her head and ate a few mouthfuls of food indiscriminately, but her thoughts kept drifting to the matter. After dinner, Wen Ning stayed in the restaurant and did not dare to go upstairs. Su Ma knew her fear, and said quickly, "If your wife is free, you can go to accompany the husband, you two spend less time together. And cultivate more feelings." Wen Ning has no experience in this area, and Zhang Shu is not a man who is easy to get along with. She has never had the courage to take the initiative. "Sir should be working in the study at the moment, you can bring some fruit to eat with him, and let him pay more attention to rest." The little girl's brows were dyed with a touch of joy, and she happily went to cut the fruit. In the study, Zhang Shu frowned, the smoke in his hand was faintly sparkling, and the ashes were scattered all over the place. "A few minutes ago, the phone call from my father Zhang Jianchuan was a slap in the face as soon as he was connected. He scolded him for not knowing how to help his brother, turning his elbows out, his wings hard and wanting to fly, arrogant and arrogant." Zhang Shu's expression was indifferent, a sneer was drawn on the corner of his lips, and if he turned his elbows out, who could have the ability of his biological father? From childhood to adulthood, as always, Chen Li was biased towards Chen Li. Only shed the same blood as him. He got up and went up to the third floor and entered the room that was locked all the year round. The furnishings in the room are warm and dreamy, and you can see that they have been carefully decorated. Zhang Shu walked to the bed in dismay, picked up the photo frame placed on the bedside table, stared at the photos. His expression was a little more gentle. The photo looks a little old, the boy in it is smiling with one side of his lips up, a little ruffian, carrying a childish little girl. The little girl smiles and her eyebrows are curved, it is a bulging cheek slightly swollen and pale blue. Zhang Shu hooked his lips and smiled softly. He remembered that the little boy lost 2 teeth at that time, and his speech was leaky. He covered his mouth with a smile so that he could not laugh at him. He was still young that year, and the little girl didn't come to see him on the day he left. When he was brought abroad by his mother, he was unable to find her and take her with him. Later, he searched for her in China for many years. There has been no audio. I don't know how much hardship that little guy will endure all alone over the years, maybe even already. Thinking of this, Zhang Shu's palms tightened unconsciously, distracted, put the photo frame back, took it, pack a cigarette and go out to the terrace to breathe. Wen Ning took a plate of freshly cut fruit and turned around a few times on the second floor, but couldn't find the place for the study. When I reached the stairs, I seemed to hear a movement on the third floor and walked upstairs happily. The door at the end of the third floor is not closed, and you can see a room full of girls. The white gauze powder curtain is adorned with crystal beads, and the ivory white carved dresser has everything from big brands to new products. The shoes, bags, and jewelry, the pink and tender skirts with a strong straight male aesthetic are listed one by one according to the size and length. If you look closely, you can find that the size and style of these skirts range from 7 or 8 years old to 18 and 20, which seems to accompany a girl's growth. Although Wen Ning has never used any good things and doesn't know much about the goods, she knows that these must be valuable, so she stays where she is, and doesn't dare to take another step forward. The whole style of this room is different from the rest of the villa. She knew that she must have found the wrong place. Zhang Shu was still in a bad mood after smoking half a pack of cigarettes. When he turned around and entered the door, he saw Wen Ning standing in the room. The man's eyebrows and eyes were instantly stained with sullenness, and the smirk he had used to tease her earlier was gone, replaced by the most common coldness and cruelty in this man. He took a few steps to Wen Ning and grabbed her wrist. Wen Ning was taken aback, the fruit plate in her hand was not steady, and all fell to the ground in an instant, and the juice stained the clean light pink carpet wet. Zhang Shu looked down, his expression became even more terrifying, his unique military voice was deep and cold. "Who allowed you to come in? I just wanted to give you something." Zhang Shu pressed his tongue against his cheek, very impatient, and didn't seem to want to hear her explanation. He sneered coldly, and his words were full of emotionless mockery. "Will I give you a few days? With a good face, you really treat yourself as the mistress of the house. Why do you think you can enter anywhere? What happened?" Zhang Shu asked with a cold face. Wen Ning was so frightened that her hands were shaking. I don't. I warn you, Lao Tzu is not a good-natured person. After he finished speaking, he released her with cold eyes. Jiang Shu didn't have the slightest idea of pity and cherish the jade, turned around and took a document from the drawer, no emotion in his eyes. A few pieces of paper were thrown in front of Wen Ning, with the treaty densely written on it, and then Jiang Shu said, I thought you were quite obedient. He sneered coldly, with contempt in his eyes, I signed the agreement. I don't have the time to waste time on this matter. I will provide you with delicious food and drink until the old man is sick, and fulfill your obligations. After the grandfather is sick, I will take the money and leave. 20-year-old Wen Ning left that terrifying little village for the first time, entered the palace of marriage for the first time, became someone else's wife for the first time, and received the divorce agreement for the first time book. She carefully raised her head and looked at Jiang Shu. The latter didn't even give her half a look. She only knew that she had made Jiang Shu angry, very angry, and hurriedly negotiated the agreement. The book is put away and folded, regardless of whether the contract is good or bad for him. He asks her to sign it, then she signs it obediently, and his anger may be relieved. The little girl picked up the pen that rolled in the corner of the cabinet, flipped to the last page a few times to find the location of the signature, and wrote the name with a trembling hand. Jiang Shu looked down at the little boy who was lying on the ground with the signature, and seeing her bookmark the agreement without hesitation, the long-awaited relief did not come, but became even more annoyed. After Wen Ning finished writing, she stood up from the carpet, held the agreement in both hands and handed it to Jiang Shu, her face full of cautious ingratiating. Sign, sign, don't be angry. Jiang Shu took it coldly and glanced at the fruit bowl on the ground. Take your things and roll. When Wen Ning left, there was only a faint fruity scent left in the bedroom. Jiang Shu held the agreement tightly in his hand. The originally flat white paper was wrinkled. He casually swiped the name Wen Ning had just signed. I rubbed the ink on the wet ink, intentionally or unintentionally, but suddenly stopped frowning. This ink seems familiar, and it is somewhat similar to his. The author has something to say. Awesome boy, he has a good temper, and the fire of my stove is lit. Jiang Shu, I am here to kowtow to Ning Ning and everyone. By the way, Zhiduxing, get out of here for Lao Tzu. If I don't kill you today, I don't have the surname Zhang. Stay steady, don't panic. Small scene. Wen Ning knew that she was making him unhappy, so she didn't even dare to go up to the second floor. Husband and wife obligations. Jiang Shu's mood has not improved. He played it 3 times at night, and the previous 3-point teasing and 7-point smile disappeared during the work, and there was no trace of emotion. There is no seriousness to start, and how does not pity Xiangziyu? Wen Ning couldn't stand him at first, but now he has a temper, and it is even more difficult to resist. After a few times, she returned to the exclusive small sofa and was relieved. At night, Wen Ning fell asleep with the thin quilt in her arms. It was only slightly bright the next morning. Before the man on the bed woke up, the little girl dressed well and went back to the first floor. September in Hanchanj is still the season of wearing short sleeves. Wen Ning changed 2 t-shirts back and forth, and the clothes were washed a little too large and deformed. Mother Su was making breakfast in the kitchen. She started to fight with the past, and she moved a little more. Su Ma immediately got an ant smile when she saw it, and stretched out her hand to pull up her clothes. Wen Ning tilted her head and looked at her eyes, her ears instantly turned red. Her skin is thin, Jiang Shu's actions were rough last night, and pink like this is almost all over her body. Gone. Wen Ning's eyelashes tremble slightly, if only because she likes it. The atmosphere at breakfast was a little awkward. Jiang Shu didn't say a word, and Wen Ning didn't dare to look up. For several days, Jiang Shu left early and returned late, and he almost lived in the company. Every time he came back, he only took out a few hours at night to bully Wen Ning, and the rest didn't say a word of nonsense. After venting that night, he stayed up all night and smoked half a pack of cigarettes on the balcony. When he came back, Wen Ning was already asleep. He stood by her small sofa for a while, unable to hold out his hand, gently lifted the thin quilt on her body. The little girl's arms and waist were full of traces that belonged to him. He frowned for a while, then lightly covered her with the quilt, knowing that she couldn't really blame her for what happened during the day, but he couldn't hold back his anger for a while. But he is not a person who can bow his head. Even if he knows that he has lost his temper too much, there is no apology in his life. Later I heard that there were many things that little girls liked at the charity auction soon. I thought that when I brought Wen Ning over, what she liked, I bought it for her with some money. There is no girl who can resist material things and problems that can be solved by spending money. In Jiangsu, this is not a problem. Time flies and it's another weekend. The charity auction banquet is scheduled for 6 p.m. on Sunday. During dinner in the evening, Jiangsu rarely returned to Yuganan early. The man who hadn't been seen at the dining table for so many days suddenly came back. Wen Ning couldn't help but looked at it a few more times, his expression to please. He carefully served him a bowl of rice. Jiangsu didn't refuse, and ate it after taking it. After 3 rounds of dinner, he put down his chopsticks and wiped his mouth with a tissue. Come with me to a banquet tomorrow night. The next evening, Ren Tiangao came to Yuganan with a stylist. Wen Ning had never seen such a scene before, so she had to be at the mercy of her honestly. Slim waist Ying Ying grasp. At 5:30 in the evening, Ren Tiangao sent Wen Ning downstairs to Jiang's building. Jiangsu came out of the company and went straight to the back seat of the black Maybach. Today, he called high-level executives to work overtime for a whole day's meeting. At this moment, he was somewhat tired. When he got into the car, he twisted the mountain route with one hand and frowned slightly, and he didn't pay attention to the little woman beside him for a while. The man raised his eyes to meet the eyes of Ren Tiangao, who kept glancing from the rear-view mirror. Nintendo. Yes, Mr. Zhang. Am I short of money? Nintendo. Before he had time to think about it, he saw Jiangsu holding a corner of Wen Ning's dress fabric with his fingers, with a slightly disgusted expression. You are so poor that you can afford such a cloth. After finishing speaking, he subconsciously touched the small white part of Wen Ning's waist. His face was even more ugly. Why is there not even a piece of cloth here? Wen Ning made her earlobes red when he touched her, but she didn't have the guts to hide. Jiangsu, isn't it cold when you dress like this? I'm freezing for you. The skirt is so short, and the 2 white slender legs are not covered at all. Wen Ning whispered, it's still summer. Ren Tiangao almost couldn't help laughing. There was a kind of coldness called your husband thinks you are cold. Jiangsu snorted coldly, and glanced at Ren Tiangao unhappily. There seemed to be countless ice knives hidden in his eyes. This banquet can be attended by celebrities from all walks of life in Hanshinj, and the venue is set on the top floor of a 5-star hotel under Jiang's name. At the entrance of the venue, the waiter bowed politely to check the admission invitation. When he arrived at Jiangsu, he immediately faded his formulaic expression and put on a smile. Mr. Zhang, good evening, just walk from this side. Wen Ning had never seen such a big scene before, and she was always a little cautious when she followed behind. When she was about to enter the door, she was stopped. Miss, please show your invitation. Wen Ning looked at Jiangsu blankly, but the man looked casual, his thin lips were slightly hooked, and he was condescending. It seems that from beginning to end, she has no confidence as Mrs. Jiangsu. After a while, she took a deep breath, carefully caught up to Jiangsu, and reached out to wrap his arms around him. It was the first time she was so intimate in front of outsiders. Wen Ning always felt that there were people watching her from all directions. Her heart was beating more and more. Her hands subconsciously clenched Jiangsu's arms tightly, and after a while, the man beside him suddenly smiled. Let's relax a little, I can't run. Wen Ning blushed. Oh. 2 women approached, looking like a mother and daughter in terms of age. Hello, Mr. Zhang, what a coincidence. The older Chang Jiangshu opened his mouth, smiling gracefully. Jiangshu was arrogant and nodded at will. Mrs. Chen was familiar with her, and continued to compliment, Mr. Zhang is young and promising, and he is well known in our circle. It is also our fate to meet President Zhang here today. After she finished speaking, she quickly pulled over the young girl beside her. This is my sister's daughter, Liu Shi, Xiao Shi, say hello to President Zhang. Liu Shi smiled sweetly, Mr. Zhang is good. Zhang Shu looked nonchalant, and only hummed lightly, but it caused Liu Shi and the ladies and daughters who were secretly looking at him to blush. The charity auction started soon, and Wen Ning sat down with Zhang Shu. The man lacked interest, leaning on the VIP seat with his legs crossed, occasionally tilting his head to see her reaction. I don't know what she likes. This girl looks like she is joining in the fun. He simply raises his placards from time to time. Yes, just buy them all, don't bother to bother. Several collections were auctioned at high prices one after another, and many celebrities were eager to raise their cards to compete in order to gain face, but when they saw that the competitor was Zhang Shu, they immediately stopped embarrassingly. Everyone knew that, if Zhang Shu wanted to fight, all the people in the room would not be able to compete with him. The last item in the collection is the top priority of this charity auction. Many people come here because of this ice-floating flower bracelet from the Middle Qing dynasty. The starting price is 100,000, and the guests holding placards are in an endless stream. Once in 2 million. 3 million. 3 million once, 3 million twice. 4 million. The man beside her casually tilted her head. Seeing her expression, she thought she liked it, so he lazily raised the card in his hand and spit out a number, 5 million. Wen Ning couldn't help taking a breath. What kind of man was she marrying? She was not only surprised, but Liu Shi, who was not far away, also looked at Zhang Shu with blushing cheeks. She fell in love with this floating flower bracelet at a glance, and just made a few bids. Seeing that the price exceeded her budget, she had no choice but to give up. Just as she didn't want to give up, Zhang Shu opened her mouth. Mrs. Chen flushed her face and whispered beside her ear, Xiao Shi, I think this President Zhang is interested in you. Seeing that you like it, I'll take it for you. Mrs. Chen couldn't hold back her smile. Our little poems are outstanding and talented. How many sons and brothers in Hanjinj think, it's not surprising that President Zhang likes you at first sight. At the end of the auction, the amount was high, and most people shook their heads to accept it, leaving only one man at the back still competing. 7 million. Zhang Shu, 8 million. Liu Shi was shy and her heart was pounding. Wen Ning just took a sip and choked twice at the number. Zhang Shu subconsciously reached out and patted her back. When I returned to my senses, the flower bracelet had been photographed by the man behind for 9 million. Zhang Shu raised his eyebrows and looked back, saw the familiar wink, and pulled the corner of his lips lazily. The charity shooting event ended soon. Everyone returned to the reception hall one after another. There were many people in the venue. Zhang Shu felt a little bored. He took off his jacket and handed it to Wen Ning. There was a smell unique to men in her breath. She lowered her head slightly and her cheeks couldn't help but get hot. After a while, the man who had just photographed the flower bracelet at a high price excitedly waved to Zhang Shu, Brother Shu. Zhang Shu raised his eyes and walked lazily in his direction. Wen Ning hasn't reacted yet, and fell a distance. As soon as Liu Shi and Mrs. Chen came out of the auction, they filled the hall looking for Zhang Shu. The two passed by Wen Ning hand in hand, paused, and suddenly stopped in front of Wen Ning. Liu Shi, are you Mr. Jiang's secretary? Zhang Shu's absence from the wedding at the beginning has long been spread in the circle, and everyone defaulted that the position of the young grandmother of the Zhang family was still empty. The disgusting wife was brought by her side. Wen Ning raised her head timidly to meet her gaze, and clasped the suit in her arms subconsciously, and finally just hummed, not daring to explain more. Lu Shi looked disdainful, snatched the jacket from Wen Ning's arms and frowned, "Tisk, let me get it for President Zhang, the suits are all wrinkled for you, why is the secretary beside President Zhang? Even this little thing can't be done well." After she finished speaking, she took Mrs. Chen and walked quickly towards Zhang Shu. Wen Ning stood still, not sure if she should step forward. "Brother Shu? Did you like this bracelet?" Lu Shike just walked behind Zhang Shu when he heard the man who took the flower bracelet ask a question. Zhang Shu glanced at him lazily, "What are you kidding me for?" He Cheng smiled and said, "Want to send my sister-in-law? I just returned to China, I have to express that it is a gift for my sister-in-law." Lu Shi thought that the sister-in-law was talking about herself, and with a blushing smile, she reached out and handed the suit to Zhang Shu. "Mr. Zhang, return the suit to you." Zhang Shu frowned slightly, just now he threw the suit to Wen Ning and didn't think it was wrong, but now that Lu Shi touched it, he immediately thought it was dirty, and said to He Cheng with a sullen face, "Throw it for me." He Cheng took it with a smile, "This is..." Zhang Shu raised his eyes, and the words "You ask Lao Zi, Lao Zi ask ghosts" are clearly written in his eyes. Mrs. Chen hurriedly took over the conversation with a smile, "Zhang Shao, our little poem just came back from abroad not long ago, and it happened to be at the same time as your return to China. What a coincidence do you think it is? It's all fate." Now that the children have grown up, Xiao Shi has reached the age to talk about marriage. Wen Ning didn't follow her for a long time. He looked back and saw that she was standing alone in the distance, and she was not happy with the beautiful aunt in front of her. Mrs. Chen saw that Zhang Shu was ignorant, and immediately looked at He Cheng, "Young master He, I thank you for this bracelet on behalf of Xiaoshi." He Cheng. Before He Cheng asked, Zhang Shu, who had been cold-faced, said, "Sorry, my wife really likes this flower bracelet, so I have to give it to her in a while, otherwise she will get angry with me." He Cheng smiled and said, "Tisk, brother Shu, what's the situation? My sister-in-law is very charming, right? I haven't seen a married wife in a few days." Lv Shi, who had been looking forward to the whole night, turned red and white, "Young Master Zhang, it is said outside that you don't like that wife married in the back country?" Zhang Shu suddenly burst into a nameless fire, he didn't even bother to listen, he interrupted impatiently, with a cold warning in his words, "Without the yuppie who was beside Wen Ning, you can talk about your wife too." He sneered, "My wife is a little girl in her early 20s this year. You, a woman who can't cover her wrinkles with a face full of sex, how can you be compared with her? If you have money, don't think about buying a flower bracelet that doesn't match, save yourself a mirror and look at it." Zhang Shu sneered. Lu Shi was so humiliated that his face flushed and he felt ashamed, but the other party was Zhang Shu. "Look, I saw the man walk in front of Wen Ning a few steps." The big hand subconsciously grabbed the inch of skin exposed to the air around Wen Ning's waist. His expression was completely different from the way he had just ridiculed her, even he stretched out his hand and pinched the little woman's face like no one else, with a gentle chuckle that he didn't even notice. "Lost again? Don't know how to follow me?" Lu and Chen's family intend to take the high branch of the daughter of Panjiang's family, which has been cultivated for more than 20 years. They got the news early in the morning that Zhang Shu is going to attend the charity auction, and plan to give her as a gift tonight. For Zhang Shu, who would have thought that Zhang Shu not only looked down on her, but also mocked her arrogantly as rumored in the circle. Lu Shi turned blue with anger. She was pampered as a little princess since she was a child. She has never suffered such a great grievance in her life. Tears rolled in her eyes, but she didn't dare to fall. She knew that all the people around her, everyone is watching her jokes. Mrs. Chen sighed in disgust and pulled the person out of the hotel. She lost her love for her previous aunt, so she randomly called a taxi, stuffed her in and threw her back to Lu's house. Wen Ning dresses cool tonight, Zhang Shu is a possessive macho in his bones, From time to time he uses his arms and body to block the place where there is no fabric around her waist, and his warm palms are sometimes close. Her skin was causing her ears to turn pink. He Cheng's temperament is different from Jiangshu. Looking at the show, she glanced at Liu Shi, who was dragged away, then turned her head and bumped Jiangshu's arm with an ambiguous expression. "Brother Shu, don't you introduce me." Jiangshu lazily gave him a blank look, and he had no such plans. He Chenman didn't care, and the hippie smile began to introduce himself. "My name is He Cheng, sorry brother, we grew up together." After he said hello, he habitually reached out to Wen Ning, but Jiangshu slapped it away before he touched. Jiangshu's tall body crossed in front of the two of them, blocking most of Wen Ning. The little girl was disappointed for a while. Jiangshu never seemed to be willing to introduce her to outsiders. When she entered the venue, she was stopped by the waiter. He didn't mean to let her contact him at all, and he didn't even bother to speak. In Jiangshu's eyes, she was always unable to do it. She didn't dare to say a word. She lowered her head and turned around to go to the pastry area, not here to embarrass Jiangshu. He Cheng tutted and joked, "Brother Shu, what's the matter? You're still blocking it, so you don't need to hide it like this, right? It's like something, baby." Jiangshu's face was cold, but he did not deny it. He subconsciously really wanted to hide Wen Ning tightly. No one looked at it. "No way." Seeing his expression, He Cheng said, "You are so possessive." Jiangshu glanced at him and smiled a little. "Ruffian, go away. Wen Ning has gone far. This venue is magnificent, and the people who come and go are all celebrities in the cold city." He Cheng finished his mouth and realized that Wen Ning was gone. Looking from his direction, the little beauty in his brother's house didn't look very good. "Brother Shu, sister-in-law doesn't seem to be in a good mood." Jiangshu lazily turned around and glanced at Wen Ning. "Did you make those two women angry just now? Maybe the sister-in-law heard all what the two foolishly said, and she's jealous right now." "Which two women?" Jiangshu asked lightly. He Cheng almost couldn't hold back his laughter, but it was a familiar taste. People who Jiangshu looked down on were not worthy of being remembered by him. "It's only been a few minutes." He Cheng imitated Liu Shi's pretentious tone, winked and said two lines. Jiangshu frowned and scolded, "Fuck. Hurry up and coax, the girl is jealous, it's serious." "No need. He is arrogant and has always been condescending. It's his utmost patience. He Cheng looks like someone from the past. When it comes to falling in love, he forgives the inexperienced brother who is definitely not as good as him. It's not good for a little girl to have a lot of thoughts and be wronged." He didn't bother to guess what the girl was thinking. What kind of vinegar is there to eat? "Hey!" He Cheng was stunned when asked. Jiangshu looked disdainful and mocking. "Do you like that stupid woman just now? Give it to you." "Brother, you lied to me. With that kind of thing, in terms of body and face, what is worse than her in Wen Ning? How can you be jealous?" He Cheng blinked. "That's right. It seems quite reasonable." However, the man with the righteous and logical words in his mouth was not very comfortable after saying these words. He glanced at Wen Ning again, staring at the aggrieved and lonely expression on her face. He tugged at his tie with one hand, feeling agitated. He Cheng happened to pick up a phone call, and there was a burst of heavy metal music on the other end of the phone, which made the noise unbearable. He just returned to China today, and his brothers wanted to pick up the air for him, knowing that he was with Jiangshu. "One piece, coax and let the two go together." He Cheng tilted his head and asked, "Brother Shu, go for a drink." "Brother Shu, they said they should take my sister-in-law with you, let's see you." He Cheng smiled. Jiangshu's face darkened, and he glanced at him coldly. "That kind of place is not suitable for her." He Cheng shut his mouth very consciously. This perverted possessiveness is no longer there. The silver sports car galloped against the ground, and He Cheng asked, "Brother Shu, how about my car? The new one I just mentioned today." Zhang Shu was leaning on the leather sofa lazily, staring down at the phone and ignoring him. Just now he and He Cheng came out, but he didn't inform Wen Ning, and he never answered the phone call to her. Zhang Shu lost his patience and simply sent a text message, asking her to send it to Ren Tiangao. She goes back. The car arrived at the door of the clubhouse after a while, and when the two entered the door, the box was already filled with smoke. When the people at the poker table saw Zhang Shu coming, they immediately gave up a seat. The tobacco and alcohol were all prepared for him. Zhang Shu was not interested, so he just took the cigarette, waved his hand, and his voice was a little deep. "You guys play." After that, I sat lazily on the soft seat on the side. The music in the box was deafening. He Cheng held the microphone and sang little love songs, screaming and screaming. Zhang Shu bent his elbows, pinched the roots of the mountain with his fingers, frowned slightly, and unconsciously took out his mobile phone. He called Wen Ning again. There is still no one on the opposite side. The lady got the order and looked over quietly. The man was wearing a delicate black shirt, the sleeves were pulled to the elbows at will, the lines of the forearms were smooth and powerful, the head was tilted lazily, and the eyes were half closed. A beam of light chasing light on the top of his head happened to hit his face, and the fine black hair cast a faint shadow in front of his forehead. The whole picture was full of extravagant desire, rebellious and apostate, but still has a condescending temperament, making it difficult to approach. The appearance alone is enough to make people coveted, not to mention that he is Zhang Shu. In Hanchanj, the name Zhang Shu is a symbol of money power. It is an existence that a woman can imagine. When Miss Zhang walked over cautiously, Zhang Shu was making a second call. The other end of the phone was still busy, but a sweet voice suddenly came in his ear. "Mr. Zhang, I'll accompany you for a drink in the bar," she said, and handed the prepared wine glass to Zhang Shu. The wine in the glass was red, green, with a special smell, and she didn't know what was mixed. Zhang Shu was originally displeased, and at this moment he didn't even bother to lift his eyelids, and the tip of his tongue pressed his cheek, causing the women around him to tremble. However, in the next second, he saw his calm eyes, raised his hand, and immediately spilled the wine on the ground. "Go away." The brother who was ambiguous next to him immediately got up and chased people. "Fuck it for me to get out, who taught me? You don't understand the rules, but you come out." Young Master Jiang's idea is that something like "you can any shot." He Cheng also frowned. "Brother Shu is here today, don't be unhappy, all these messy women are taken away." When the brothers were together, although Zhang Shu played crazy, he never touched these dirty things. With his game, everyone was sensible. After He Cheng scolded over there, he came over and pulled him to play cards to change his mood. The phone never got through. Zhang Shu simply put away the phone and sat at the poker table. He is probably blessed by nature, born with a good skin, and has a good career. Even playing a card is a powerful crush. Bureau, give me some house and car as a pastime. When I am in a bad mood, I can win other people's complaints, and I can't afford underwear for half a month. After losing the 2 villas by the sea, He Cheng realized that his temper tonight was not smooth. The other buddy adopted a tactical interference strategy and laughed and joked, "Brother Shu, I usually don't see you touching women, and I don't even have a female companion at a banquet, and I brought a male assistant, what's the matter? I really plan to be single." He Cheng took a sip of wine. "Where is your 2 grams network? Brother Shu is married, don't you know?" The people on the side laughed. People in their circle, marriage is a joke, not to mention the identity of Zhang Shu. He Cheng glanced at the group of people. "What are you laughing at? Our sister-in-law is so good looking, she can be held in the entertainment circle, and it is properly top-notch. When it comes to the entertainment industry, a few are very interested. I heard that Wang Hu has been in a movie recently." "Oh, yes, Wang Wan, she has a good figure. I heard that it is still a dance academy. The students, who haven't graduated yet, are tender and spicy." He Cheng is quite disdainful. young students are nothing, but my sister-in-law's strength is crushed. Hi, brother Shu, is my sister-in-law really such a fairy? They knew that Zhang Shu didn't even attend the wedding. As soon as these words came out, everyone focused their attention on him, and after a while, when they saw him calmly dropping the last few cards in his hand, he hooked his lips, and his voice was slightly hoarse, "It's very beautiful." Almost everyone present heard Zhang Shu praise a woman like this for the first time, and now they were all curious about the one he hid at home. This interference tactic seems to be quite effective. Zhang Shu's face has become a little better since he mentioned Wen Ning. After a few rounds of cards, there are losses and wins. Obviously he let the water go. The screen of the mobile phone was always black and never turned on. Wen Ning never called back, not even text messages. To the end of the smoke, Zhang Shu didn't even touch it. He Cheng lost and was shuffling the cards. Several people had nothing to do and said a couple of dirty words, laughing together, and suddenly a mechanized female voice came from Zhang Shu's mobile phone. "Come." Everyone kept silent, and the emotionless announcement became clearer. "Sorry, the call you dialed is currently unanswered, please try again later, sorry, you." Zhang Shu's eyes dimmed slightly, he hung up the phone, and his expression didn't seem to change much. Someone teased, "Yo, who is so bold, even dare not answer the call of our brother Shu? I don't know that the other side finds out that he missed Zhang Xiao's call and will cry for a few years." Another echoed. He Cheng shuffled the cards and asked in a low voice, "Brother Shu, hasn't my sister-in-law answered the phone yet? I think she's really angry. Go back at night to coax. Which girl is so high-spirited? I don't know that brother Shu has never been a master of coaxing people. Yet, girl, you can't do it, I have everything you need to be obedient. I don't like to be busy either. Wouldn't it be nice to find a few good guys to serve you when you have time?" A few people were chatting and laughing. Zhang Shu put down his cards, got up and took away the flower bracelet, and went straight out. He Cheng caught up and asked, "Brother Shu, stop fighting." Zhang Shu said lightly, "Go home." He Cheng couldn't believe it, "Go home and coax sister-in-law." Zhang Shu glanced at him, but did not deny it. A group of people at the poker table were dumbfounded. "What's the situation? You don't really go home to coax people, do you? What's the matter? Zhang Xiao is married, and there is access control? It's only what time?" He Cheng smiled ambiguous, "Go home and coax the little girl. It's terrible, the person who just hurried away is the Prince of Hanchinj? Marriage is the grave, I don't want to jump in this life." He Cheng. "Do you have any pictures? I'm going to see what the is a goddess." The author has something to say. Once, he was a king, Lao Zi never coaxes people. Later, he married a wife, "Baby, can I kneel down for you, please don't let me sleep alone tonight." Reader, Zhang Go doesn't like being touched when he sleeps, so I wish you will always sleep alone in the future. Zhang Shu, dangerous speech, included in the assassination list. Reader, Mr. Zhang really is my person, no matter how much I hate, only I can bully Zhang Shu. I didn't say I hate it, don't talk nonsense, I'm very nervous and it's hard to explain to Ning Ning. Everyone speaks enthusiastically. After that, there will be readers commenting and replying. I want to see which unlucky ones were picked out by President Zhang to reply, assassination. Wen Ning stood alone in the venue, surrounded by cakes and snacks, which were exquisite and beautiful, but the price was high, she dared not touch anything. The people around are people who are famous in the business world. Even if they have no friendship before, they still know each other. Everyone smiled and greeted politely, and Wen Ning stood alone in the middle, which seemed out of place. Zhang Shu was not by her side, she didn't even have anyone to talk to, so she simply stood in the far corner of the venue. She has no friends since she was a child, and has adapted to being alone. The little girl lowered her head and waited quietly for more than an hour. When she looked up again, Zhang Shu was nowhere to be seen. People were leaving one after another, and the venue was empty with only a few staff left. She panicked, but she still couldn't find Zhang Shu. Seeing this, the hotel manager walked up to Wen Ning, bowed politely, and made a gesture of invitation with both hands to the right. "Hello, miss, the elevator entrance is here, I need to bring. Did you go?" Wen Ning was most afraid of troublesome people in her life. She waved her hand with a timid smile, and walked towards the exit. The elevator went all the way down to the bottom floor. She walked out of the hotel lobby, but did not find the car that Zhang Shu was in when she came. Time passes by, the night is getting darker, and the traffic on the road is gradually sparse. She has been standing on high heels for a few hours, and then she couldn't stand it anymore. She found a step by the flower bed next to the hotel door and sat down. She was obedient and waited until 10 o'clock, but still didn't Zhang Shu. She looked at the neon lights of the cold city at night from flickering to extinguishing, and smiled as if resigned. Zhang Shu left without a word. He probably didn't remember taking her with him tonight, or maybe he remembered it, but it didn't matter. Tonight was the first time she attended such an event, and she was inevitably nervous. After changing her dress, her wallet and mobile phone were all left in the bedroom, and she couldn't even make a phone call. However, on second thought, even with her mobile phone, she dared not call Zhang Shu, because he didn't know how much an insignificant phone call would disturb him, so he left her behind. How could he take the time to look back for her? Whether the city can find the way back to Yuganan, I have no idea. This hotel is built in a villa in the suburbs. People who come and go here are either rich or expensive. Most of them are picked up by private cars, so the nearest bus station is also 3 kilometers away. Wen Ning took off her high heels and walked barefoot on the asphalt. The surroundings were dark, and occasionally there were carts galloping by her side. It was impossible not to be afraid. It was nearly 11 o'clock when Zhang Shu arrived home. He subconsciously walked to the guest room where Wen Ning was staying. Seeing no one was inside, he went straight to the second master bedroom. Tonight, he was also a little tired. He just got the smell of cigarettes in the clubhouse, and simply turned into the bathroom to take a shower. The man took a bath quickly and came out wearing a large bathrobe after a while. He holds the ice-floating flower bracelet brought back from the auction tonight, and intends to put it in a place where Wen Ning can see it when she wakes up early tomorrow. It was only when he walked to the small sofa where she often slept that he realized through the moonlight that there was no familiar little figure on the sofa. Zhang Shu frowned slightly, and hurried back to the bedroom door to pick up her mobile phone. There was no password for the $400 candy bar. Zhang Shu easily unlocked it, except for a few missed calls. Even unread the text message I sent her earlier. Step downstairs. Wen Ning walked barefoot with high heels for about 10 minutes before it started to rain. She had nowhere to hide, her dress was wet, the little girl wiped the rain on her face and bit her lip. Continued to run to the bus stop a few kilometers away. I managed to get to the station, but missed the time for the last bus. Behind her, a bright grey sports car got off the elevated and followed her. She stopped beside her and honked the horn several times. Lane on the other side. Finally met at the bus stop. Wen Ning really had no way to go home. Seeing this, she thought that the other party was a taxi, weighed her tight savings, and carefully bent over to ask, "Hello, may I ask the royal family? Dry Bay, how much is it? I came out tonight without my wallet, can I go in and get it for you?" Yuganan. Zhou Ziyan was stunned for a moment, then suddenly laughed, "I won't charge you, I'm not a dick, just drop by, get in the car, it's raining too much." Already. Wen Ning was simple-minded and did not take much precautions. She got into the car and couldn't stop thanking her. Zhou Ziyan looked ahead, took off his suit jacket and handed it to her, draped. She took the coat, glanced at the wet dress on her body, and apologized, "I'm sorry, I got your car wet, I'm really sorry, while the air conditioner is on in the car, and you get caught in the rain. It's easy to catch a cold if you don't wear a coat. Wen Ning was stunned for a moment. No one had ever thought it was something worth noting that she had a cold. Thank you. The man hummed lightly. Do you live in Yuganan? Well, what's wrong? Zhou Ziyan raised his eyebrows and glanced at her. It's nothing, a friend of mine also lives there. He paused, then asked inadvertently, why didn't your husband come to pick you up? He's not worried about this black light, thunder, and rain. Wen Ning didn't realize how Zhou Ziyan knew she had a husband. A trace of embarrassment flashed in his eyes, and then he covered it up, smiled stupidly, and pretended that nothing happened. He is busy well. The sports car was very fast, and it only took more than half an hour to reach Yuganan. When the car stopped in front of the villa, Zhang Shu just arrived in front of the courtyard. Some guesses? Zhang Shu frowned, staring at the grey sports car in front of the door. The next second, Wen Ning got off the co-pilot, bent down and smiled and thanked the man in the car. Zhou Ziyan took the black umbrella and followed her. Zhang Shu's palm clenched subconsciously, his fingers pinched the flower bracelet that he didn't have time to put down, and the outline of the gift box was about to be deformed. The black umbrella covered the rain falling over her head. Wen Ning had her head lowered and her hands folded in front of her forehead. Suddenly there was no rain. She looked around in surprise and hurriedly he waved his hand. Sir, thank you, don't bother, I'm already here, don't delay your business. But seeing him at this moment is not good in my heart. Zhang Shu has a deep understanding in his eyes, his expression is slightly restrained, but there is a coldness all over his body. Zhou Ziyan chuckled suddenly, never thought that one day he would see such childish possessiveness of Prince Hanchange. Zhou Ziyan originally laughed casually, but after hearing this, his light smile faded away. Do you remember that your wife fell outside? Zhang Shu's face was very ugly. Zhou Ziyan sneered calmly, I don't think a person who is big enough to leave his wife outside and let her walk barefoot for a few kilometers in the thunderstorm to find a bus home men. How much can you value your wife? The speaker has no intention of the listener. The little girl's nose suddenly sour, and her heart is uncomfortable for no reason. She is actually a person who will be wronged. The man took Wen Ning's hand and added a little more strength, tightened his back molars, and the jawline was cold and hard, adding a little anger. What identity does Zhou Xiao use to control others? Housework. Zhou Ziyan chuckled lightly, spread his hands, and turned back to the car. The top of the grey sports car was shattered like goose feathers by the rain, and disappeared into the night in an instant. You just get into another man's car at night, so you're not afraid of being sold. Wen Ning was so nervous that she didn't dare to make a sound, she didn't dare to look up at him, her heart was pounding, she seemed to be waiting for her hair to fall, and her expression was very tense. Face. He sneered and turned away, his eyes stayed on the gift box in his hand. For the first time he felt ridiculous. A few hours ago, he was thinking of buying some gifts to make her happy. He made a few calls and she didn't answer, so he rushed back from the club absent-mindedly. For the first time, he knew how to return early. Who knows, as soon as she got home, she gave him such a big surprise. Come back with other men, talking and laughing. Thinking about it, the moment he gave the divorce agreement, he should have known that one day, this freedom was originally given by him. But for some reason, as long as he remembered Wen Ning Chong and Zhou Ziyan, bending his eyes and smiling, a nameless fire immediately ignited in his chest, making him unable to think. He didn't know what was going on with this feeling, he just felt that the gift box in his hand was annoying and useless, which was his ridiculous testimony. Zhang Shu casually raised his expression, and the gift box fell on the Roman column in front of the villa. Jade is so precious, how can it stand up to such a tossing, and it shattered into pieces in an instant. Wen Ning was startled, followed the sound to look over, and recognized that it was the item at the auction at night, hurriedly left under the umbrella, trotted over in the rain, squatted on the ground and picked it up piece by piece. The rain hit her small body. Zhang Shu's heart tightened, and he frowned and said coldly, "No matter how broken things are, they can't be repaired, so what are you picking up?" I don't know if I said this to her or to myself. For the first time, Wen Ning kept picking up in the heavy rain disobediently. The jade was picked up again in the box little by little, and her face was finally dyed with a smile again. After picking up the last small piece, the little girl squatted on the ground and raised her head, holding the gift box in her hand to him. It didn't stop her from smiling softly. "I picked it up and wrapped it up with silk thread, it looks good too." Jiang Shu's cold and hard heart seemed to be suddenly smashed softly by something. He stepped forward a few steps, suddenly grabbed Wen Ning's wrist, pulled the person up from the ground, and moved towards go upstairs. The man's footsteps are fast and his breathing is not very calm. What are you doing?" Wen Ning was held by his hand in a daze, so she had to walk quickly with her, but she felt uneasy for no reason. Jiang Shu's voice was deep, and after a while he said, "You. The author has something to say." "What? What are you talking about?" "Jiang Shu, please do not disturb." "Wen Ning, help Wu Wu Hey, one didn't pay attention, and let him have a good meal? Not far from the road." Reader, ha ha ha. Every chapter of Zhang Guo's murderous behavior was written down in a small notebook. Jiang Shu, how much can I delete? Reader, take away Ning Ning and sleep with me at night. Jiang Shu, Ren Tiangao, do it, and don't leave a hole. Notice, I will update the chapter tomorrow, at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. The man held her wrist tightly and walked upstairs. His palms were hot, and he walked quickly. Wen Ning's reaction was slow, and after a tiring day in the rain, she was so frightened by his angry appearance that she was dragged down a floor, only to realize that his "only" there is a one-word answer. What exactly does it mean? She looked away subconsciously, and hurriedly shifted her attention to other unimportant places, but the pounding of her heart became more and more severe, and she could not calm down no matter what. Jiang Shu didn't know what was going on. He couldn't stop when he got wet all night. It seems that this is the only way to feel that she is completely her own, and the mind of possession lingers. Obviously it was not her original intention to even get married. Jiang Shu took some strength and said, "Pain." Wen Ning closed her eyes and shook her head shyly and embarrassedly. What he thought was probably not in the same place as hers. Jiang Shu regained his senses, and focused his attention on the warmth in his palm. However, he couldn't think about it at the moment. He just let go of his hand and held it elsewhere. He reached out and tucked her hair behind her ear for her. Wen Ning seemed to feel a little itchy, and arched into Jiang Shu's arms in his sleep. The man raised his eyebrows, and took him into his arms with a big hand, and his heart fell for a while. Satisfaction for no reason. Wen Ning had another nightmare at night, murmured in her mouth, and sweat dripped from her forehead. Jiang Shu opened his eyes slightly, lowered his head and looked into his arms. His big hands naturally reached her back to comfort her, but her thin pajamas were also soaked with sweat. His movements were very light. Wen Ning did not wake up, fell asleep firmly, hugged the quilt and turned over, his fair and slender calf sticking out of the quilt. Jiang Shu suddenly remembered that she had just cried out in pain. Reaching out to hold her ankle, he stared at the tender feet. There are several bloodstains from friction on the soles of the feet, which have solidified and crusted at this moment. Jiang Shu frowned slightly. I suddenly thought of what Zhou Ziyan said earlier. She walked 3 kilometers barefooted in a thunderstorm by herself. This foot was probably injured at that time. The man had a sullen face, pursed his thin lips slightly, took out a cotton swab with iodine from the medicine cabinet, sat on the edge of the bed, and took her feet to apply medicine for her. Although I was sleeping at the moment, I could still feel the pain, and even because I fell asleep, I removed my usual strong disguise, and frowned and hummed twice, shrank. Calf hide. Jiang Shu didn't dare to increase the strength in his hand, so he had to follow the direction she was hiding to catch. While applying the medicine and blowing gently, his tone was gentle that he didn't notice. Okay, all right. Now, after taking the medicine, there will be no pain. This is the first time in his life to take care of someone, and also the first time to coax someone. The next morning, Wen Ning woke up very early, and as soon as she opened her eyes, she directly faced Zhang Shu's face. The last time, I didn't seem to insist on falling asleep, and I don't remember anything after that. She carefully moved out of his arms little by little, holding her breath, for fear that he would lose his temper when he woke up and saw her still lying on his bed. Back to the small sofa, she lay down and wrapped herself in the quilt, facing the other side of the bed, couldn't help but quietly looked at Zhang Shu again. Her heartbeat couldn't stop accelerating. I couldn't resist the sleepiness and fell asleep again. When Zhang Shu woke up, the little guy in his arms had disappeared. After just one night, his arms seemed to have become accustomed to the shape of Wen Ning. Nothing at all. He frowned unhappily and opened his eyes. Wen Ning was huddled on the small sofa with his back to him. When he woke up in the morning and didn't hold anyone, he couldn't tell the irritability in his heart, but the one who forced her to sleep on the small sofa was also himself. Send out. It was a working day, but Zhang Shu rarely left. When Wen Ning woke up again, the man was wearing navy blue pajamas, leaning lazily on the head of the bed, and driving a pair of delicate gold-rimmed glasses. Slender fingers tapped lightly on the laptop keyboard. Somewhat pleasing to the eye. Wen Ning was so dumbfounded that she couldn't take her eyes away. After Zhang Shu sent an email, his voice was deep. Have you seen enough? Wen Ning's heartbeat missed a beat, and she was at a loss to find another topic. Why didn't you go to the company today? Zhang Shu raised his eyebrows and looked casual. Drive me away. Wen Ning whispered, no. She sat on the sofa with the quilt obediently, remembering what happened last night, and she didn't know what Zhang Shu's attitude was now. The little girl lowered her eyes and stared at the gauze on her feet. Shu didn't speak, so he had the courage to take the initiative to speak up. Did you take this medicine for me? It looks ugly. Zhang Shu was inexplicably uncomfortable. He had never taken care of anyone like this in his life. Although the man's eyes didn't move away from the screen, but the keyboard didn't move again. No, Su Momong of. Wen Ning seemed to have gotten used to his cold answer, shook her legs, and smiled without caring, and there was no unexpected loss on her face. Zhang Shu was distracted by her indifferent smile, so he closed the computer, got up and went to the cloakroom to change into a suit. Without turning his head, he went to the airport. Zhongning Group is an industry that Zhang Shu worked all alone abroad in the early years, and its headquarters is overseas. Although he has returned to China, there are still many large projects outside waiting for him to decide in person. It's just that when I received a call from Ren Tiangao to pick him up to the airport this morning, I tilted my head and glanced at the group of sleepy little things on the sofa, inexplicably giving birth to some meaning of not wanting to leave. Ren Tiangao was waiting downstairs in the villa early in the morning. Who would have thought that the last person had not waited, and even waited for the news of 2 delayed flights? Zhang Shu waited in the room until Wen Ning woke up and chatted 2 unimportant words before leaving as if nothing had happened. Only until his plane landed on the other side of the ocean, Wen Ning didn't know about his going abroad. Zhang Shu never had the habit of reporting his itinerary to anyone. For many days in a row, Wen Ning didn't wait for Zhang Shu to come home. Although he didn't go home for dinner, he would come every few days. This trip is a long time. Wen Ning just thinks that he has a lot of work in the company and can't find time. It rained that night. Zhang Shu looked at Wen Ning's mobile phone and hurriedly went out to find her. When Wen Ning found it, it was scrapped and could not be turned on. She can only draw with the calendar every day, and count the time, and finally wait until Friday night. She excitedly went to the restaurant to set up 2 sets of tableware, and cut Zhang Shu's favorite a few kinds of fruit, holding his chin in his hands, sitting with a smile and waiting before a sumptuous dinner. After a while, the young little maid came to remind, "Madam, eat it while it's hot, it won't taste good when it's cold." Wen Ning replied with a smile, "It's all right, I'll wait for Zhang Shu to come back for a meal. Tomorrow is the weekend, he should be able to come back after get off work today." The little maids are a new batch. They go out to work with the elders in the family. It's been a few days, and it's probably going to take a long time to come back, didn't he tell you? The last sentence is just a casual mention, but the speaker has no intention of the listener. Wen Ning's expectant smile instantly froze on her face, her nose suddenly sour, and she didn't know how to speak for a while. Zhang Shu never said that, he would never tell her this. When will he go to the company and when will he come back? It has always been unknown to Wen Ning. All she can do seems to be nothing but random. The destination is waiting in the villa, waiting for him to go home. When he comes home, he is worried that he will leave without a word at any time, and he will not be able to see him for a few days. Even outsiders know where he went, only she doesn't. The little maid stopped smiling when she saw Wen Ning, worried that she had done something wrong. Madam, is the food unpalatable? Wen Ning came back to her senses, met her cautious eyes, and hurriedly squeezed a smile again. How come? It's delicious, don't be afraid. After she comforted her, she seemed to be afraid that she would not believe it. She picked up the spoon and scooped the soup into her mouth. She has suffered too many skin injuries in the past, and never shed tears because of the pain. At this moment, I don't know if it is because of the heat or something else. During the time he returned to China, Zhang Shu's career focus gradually shifted back to China, and he had a backlog of several major projects abroad. It took only 1 or 2 o'clock to get free. He called Wen Ning several times between meals during the day, but no one answered the phone, so he took the only rest time to send Wen Ning a few text messages. Zhang Shu is not a person who likes to send text messages. If there is anything, telephone communication is the fastest and most convenient. The only few text messages are sent to Wen Ning. I only asked a few words. Have you eaten yet? What did you eat today? Are your feet better? What gift do you want? I'll bring it back to you when you go back to China. As a result, for several days, I didn't receive half a reply. Entering the lounge in the evening, Zhang Shu pinched his fingers at the root of the mountain to relieve fatigue, and the other hand swiped the empty mobile phone, feeling annoyed for no reason. Is her phone a display? Zhang Shu frowned, recalling the candy bar she bought for 400 yuan, which didn't even have a video function. The man had a cold face, regardless of whether Ren Tiangao slept at 2 o'clock at night, he directly called him. Ren Tiangao was sober, and as soon as he answered the phone, he began to report professionally, Mr. Zhang, I have informed the content of the meeting tomorrow morning, and the person in charge of the ship equipment will be. Before he finished reporting, Zhang Shu suddenly interrupted, go and buy a mobile phone for Wen Ning in the morning tomorrow. Ren Tiangao had a rare meal, and immediately agreed, okay, President Zhang. Zhang Shu mentioned it casually before going abroad, and asked him to prepare some gifts for Wen Ning to bring back. The female colleagues he arranged to accompany bought a lot these days. Down. Zhang Shu hung up the phone and closed his eyes, but he still couldn't fall asleep. He probably bullied Wen Ning for a few meals in Yugnan before leaving the country, and the bones were softened in Wenro township. It's now a habit. Tossing and turning for a long time, he suddenly thought of something, took the mobile phone, and made a call to the villa landline. The call was answered by Su's mother. When she heard Zhang Shu's voice, she immediately asked, I need me. Are you going to call your wife? No need. Obviously she thought about it in her heart, but at this moment she refused. However, every sentence is inseparable from Wen Ning. What did she eat today? What time did she get up in the morning? It was raining that night, so you made her tea for a few days. Forcing to drink, there is nothing she doesn't like to drink, who is used to her. Zhang Shu probably didn't realize it himself. Tonight, he was very nagging, talking a lot, but in the end he couldn't hold back. He asked, did she sleep? The author has something to say. Zhang Shu, why doesn't my wife come to answer my phone?